Have you ever wondered just what is a conservative? Well, that's the question I'm going to tackle today on the Oconee Conservative Corner. So, just what is a conservative? Well, before I get into that, let me talk about what I'm doing here. And this is a podcast it's the official podcast of the Oconee Conservatives. And what the Oconee Conservatives is it started out as a Facebook group, and it's now become a nonprofit organization. But what it was originally for was to hold local politicians accountable to their constituency, because most of the time with politicians, they go and they just run as a Republican, especially in Oconee County here in South Carolina. They run as a Republican, and then people just ignore it. They just trust, all right, they're a Republican, they're going to vote conservatively, that's the way it is. Well, that goes on the local level, that goes on the state level, that goes on the national level. And we're really starting to see this grassroots movement of conservatives in not just South Carolina, but all across the country. And you have the conservatives, you have the establishment, which is moderates, you have what's called the Uniparty. And what that is, the best way that I can describe that, okay, whenever we're taught in school, you have left wing, you have right wing, and they're both attached to the same wonky bird. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Now, it is all the same wonky bird, but in school, we were taught that staying in the middle was probably the best way to go, the best way to stay out of conflict. Well, the problem with that is the middle is not absolute. Now, why is it not absolute? Because it's not grounded on a foundation of principles. And that's where the conservative idea comes from. And you have conservatism, and it's a belief system based on principles. And we'll get into those principles a little more later maybe. But what you have is you have the conservatives, which are grounded on a foundation. That makes them the right absolute. Okay? Now, if you look at the Republicans and Democrats of like the 70s and 80s, now the Democrats, they weren't communists, they weren't for socialism or anything like that. They were more like the moderate Republicans of today. Now, as the left or the liberals have become more of a Democrat socialist party, moving further and further left, the middle ground has changed and has shifted further left. That's why moderate Republicans sit more like Democrats of the 70s and 80s. Well, now, if you think about it, think of freedom like a rope. And what you have is you have conservatives that want to hold all the rope and all the power with the people. And then on the left, you have socialists who want to give all of the freedoms to the government in exchange for security. Now, granted, Thomas Jefferson said in one of his writings, those who would choose security over freedom deserve neither. See, the Founding Fathers knew what they were talking about whenever they wrote the Constitution. The Constitution is one of the greatest documents ever written in history, not just the history of the United States, but in history, period. And we don't teach it in schools anymore. And that's the one place where it should be taught. So when we think of the Founding Fathers, they knew that too much government was not a good thing, that the power lied with the people. And government service, I say this a good bit, whenever you get into politics is public service. and public service is selfless service. And where we get into corruption and things like that is people start, or politicians quit being representatives, and they start being selfish or self-serving, and it's more about what they can gain. And that's what the Oconee County Conservatives started going against, was people who were out there more for personal gain rather than serving the people. But going back to the analogy that I was talking about, whenever you think of freedom as a rope, you have the left that wants to give all the rope to the government. You have conservatives on the right who want to keep all the rope with the people. Well, in the middle, you've got moderate Democrats and Republicans. It's not just moderate Republicans. You have moderate Democrats too that they don't completely agree with what the socialist part of the Democrat Party, but they go along to get along. This is another reason why go along, get along politics is not a good thing. So you have these moderates who want to give a little bit of the rope at a time. Well, the problem with that is eventually you run out of rope, okay? We only have so many rights that are guaranteed by our Creator. And as you give up those rights, you lose them. You don't get any of that rope back. Okay, the rope only goes one way. So that's where conservatives want to hold on to their constitutional rights. They want to limit the government. They want to control out of control spending. And that's where South Carolina is really struggling as a conservative or a red state, is our spending is so out of control. And we've got to get that under control, or we're going to, the country's bankrupting itself right now, and I think everybody knows that, and that's where it ties into national politics. We saw just a couple of days ago, or last week, the House of Representatives in a gridlock, and a lot of that was over the reckless spending. A lot of that came from the omnibus spending package that the Senate signed. I mean, and Republicans like our own Lindsey Graham agreed to that. I think it's $1.7 trillion. It may have even been more than that. And it's just wasteful, just throw money at it. And we're bankrupting the country over stuff like that. And that's where conservatives come into play. And the Republican Party is getting a lot of eyes on it. And it's not just the National Republican Party. It's not just the state Republican Party. It is the Republican Party as a whole. It is splitting. And why is the Republican Party splitting, but the Democrat Party looks so united? Because you have conservatives standing on principles, and then you have moderate Republicans that are go along to get along, and they're forming this uniparty with Democrats. And they're just pushing liberal policies. They might as well be Democrats. As a matter, we say rhinos, but I don't believe there's a such thing as a rhino. They're Democrats. That's all the way it is, because they have a liberal belief system. Okay, you can't be a liberal and a conservative at the same time. Now I guess you can be a liberal Republican, because you can have liberal ideas and still put an R behind your name and be a Republican. But that's not the way that it should be. If you run as a Republican because the Republican platform aligns with conservatives, and you give this perception that you're a conservative and you stand on conservative principles, then you need to stand on those, and you should be held accountable. And that's a lot of reasons why the Oconee County Conservatives catch a lot of hate, is because we hold those politicians accountable, and they don't like it. And to me, that's just too bad. I'm going to say it, because whenever you hold someone accountable, no, they're not going to like it. They're going to get mad, and they're going to pitch a fit. And to be quite honest with you, I don't care. I'm a parent. When my kids pitch a fit, I don't care. They're still not getting what they want. Okay? Like I said earlier, whenever you get into politics, it is public service. And public service is selfless service. Okay? And whenever you get into politics, if you do it right, It's meant to be a burden. It's meant for the life of me. I have a lot of people who come to me. When are you going to run for county council? When are you going to throw your hat in the ring? Honestly, I don't want to, and the reason for that is because why would anybody want to get it? Why would anybody want that burden? It blows my mind. But at the same time, would you be really willing to sacrifice that for your community? And that's what makes conservative politicians, or not necessarily politicians, but representatives, so honorable. And while I'm on the subject, we're talking about honorable. If you go to change.org, and let me pull it up here on my phone while I'm talking, and I have a petition started, and you don't necessarily have to be from Oconee County to get into this, but Oconee County has one Medal of Honor winner. Pickens County actually has 4. Pickens County has the most Medal of Honor winners per capita than any other county in South Carolina. Well, Oconee County has 1, and I'm sitting here pulling it up right now to give you the full address. But if you would go to change.org and look for Lewis G. Watkins Memorial Highway, I've started this petition, and you can go on the Oconee Conservative Corner Facebook page if you like. I have a web page coming as well, but what I'm trying to do with this is our one Medal of Honor winner. The post office in Seneca is named after him, but there's nothing on the outside. Okay? And you have to go in to see the display that they have for him. Well, also there's a memorial outside the county courthouse, and I've talked to some veterans group, and they'll agree with me on this, that while it's appreciated, the monument that's out front there, it could be better. And if you go and you read Lewis G. Watkins' Medal of Honor citation, it's truly an amazing story. And I'm former military myself. I'm retired. I did 5 years active duty Army, and then I went into the National Guard, and I spent the next 15 years in that, and then retired last year. My dad is a former Marine. That's how I knew who Lewis G. Watkins was, or Staff Sergeant Lewis Watkins. The story is incredible at what he did to receive the Medal of Honor. And it's gut-wrenching, especially when you find out now, according to Wikipedia, his burial site is in Honolulu, Hawaii. Well, there's also a grave marker here in Oconee. And the thing about that is those are empty graves. Staff Sergeant Watkins' body was never recovered. It's a truly incredible story. But if you don't mind, go to change.org, find the Lewis G. Watkins Memorial Highway petition for me, please, and sign, share it. I need as many people as possible, because I want to get a section of well-traveled highway here in Oconee County named in his honor, because most people in Oconee don't even know that we have a Medal of Honor recipient from the county. And as I'm sitting here recording, I got to thinking about it. It's something that was brought up to me. I hope I didn't say it in the past on this podcast about calling him a winner, because it's not a contest. So if I said that earlier, I misspoke, and I'm sorry. But he's our Medal of Honor recipient, and people don't know. So if we could get a highway marker and people ride by and see, we have phones now that we can look up anything, and people look up who is Staff Sergeant Lewis G. Watkins and see his story and his sacrifice. I think that would be a great thing, because in Oconee County, when you graduate high school, you have several things you can do. You can go to college, which a small majority from Oconee do. You can go to tech and learn a trade, or you can go in the military. That was the route that I chose. I went in the Army. A lot of our youth leave Oconee and go into the Army or go into the Marines, Navy, Air Force, whatever. We have a lot of veterans in Oconee. I wonder how many of them don't know who Staff Sergeant Watkins is or was. And I learned from my dad, who's a former Marine, like I said. So I really would appreciate people getting the word out about that. Now, on to the next subject. Let's talk about the woke agenda for a minute. How many people know about ESG scores? Now, as Americans, we have credit scores. Credit scores drive how we can loan or how we can borrow money, what kind of interest rates we can get whenever you go and you buy a car, buy a house, whatever. You have to have a good credit score. Well, there's this thing out there called an ESG score, and it is driven on businesses and corporations. And the ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And what that means is what that has to do with is issues like social justice, things of that nature. You hear it on the news. You have global warming, how a business treats global warming, things of that nature. And if you'll notice, corporations like Disney is one of the most successful now corporations ever in the United States. Well, what drove them to be more woke? Well, it has to do with that ESG score. So I'll give you another example, is Tesla. I believe it was November of 2021, Elon Musk began talks of buying Twitter. About a month later, the S&P 500 ESG dropped Twitter from its stock exchange or whatever. Since then, Twitter started, at that time, Tesla was trading at like over $400 a share. Now, since it's been dropped from the ESG or the S&P 500 ESG, its stock is exchanging at about 160 something a share, I think. So because it got dropped from this ESG scale or trade, whatever, their business has completely dropped. And so what it is companies won't do business with them, because if they do business with them, then their profits drop. And that's what's driving a lot of these corporations to become so woke. You think about Walmart. Walmart's all about this woke agenda at times, and it has to do with this ESG score. Well, where did the ESG come from? It actually was started by the Chinese Communist Party. And the Chinese, or the CCP, started this in their own country, and they don't just use it on businesses. They actually use it on people as well, and it's a form of control. It's how the government can control corporations, control people, it's all about control. So whenever you see this woke agenda pushing, know that that's where it comes from. And I'm getting close to closing out here. This episode's only going to be about 30 minutes. But I just wanted to lay a foundation for the Oconee Conservative Corner. And to close out, I want to talk about something. I want to talk about faith. And I believe one of the scriptures that I kind of try to live by says, "In everything you do for the glory of God." Well, that's where I'm closing out here and talking about faith. And starting this podcast it's been trying. Anxiety, fear of failing, and I know that you can't be afraid to fail. Whenever I went through airborne school in the Army, you get up there in that plane, you go through your 2 weeks of training, you get up there in the third week, and you're standing there in the door of this airplane, and they tell you to jump out. And I came to the realization you just got to step out. Now, does that mean faith is just jumping off a cliff and hoping God keeps you from falling? No. If you jump off a cliff without any parachute or anything, we all know what the end result's going to be. But faith is starting a walk and believing that you've been set in a direction and you don't know what the destination is. So you just start walking in that direction. And whenever you do get to the cliff, you have faith that God's going to provide either the materials or the people to help you build a bridge across the gap. And so that's what I'm doing here. I don't have everything in place to do the greatest quality podcast. As a matter of fact, right now I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep because I worked night shift last night. But having faith to just do it and just step out, knowing that you do have a parachute to catch you. And even if you fail, one of the things that I've said and I try to live by, failure is not defined by how you fall. It's defined by how and if you get back up. And so no matter how many times you fall, you have to get back up. You have to get back on the horse. You have to get back on the bicycle. Whatever analogy you want to use, you have to be willing to get back up no matter the failure, no matter how many people tell you you can't do this or how many people laugh at you. There's people going to laugh at me over this first podcast. Okay, laugh. I don't care. I really don't. It's not about who's laughing at the beginning. It's about who's laughing at the end. And so don't be afraid to get out there and get involved in your local politics, because I'm trying to give conservatives in Oconee County a voice, and I'm trying to get the information out there. And that's what I want to do with this podcast. And it's getting close to about 30 minutes or so. It's probably going to be a little bit short. But as time goes on, I'm going to tell you more about what's going on in Oconee and things of that nature. We'll get into the Oconee Joint Regional Sewer Authority craziness that goes on in southern Oconee County. Southern Oconee County gets ignored so much, and I want to talk about that more, the craziness of how they had a great deal and they chose not to take it at the expense of the county taxpayer. And next week, that's what I'm going to talk about. Or next show. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it weekly or every 2 weeks, but the next show I'm going to talk about the Oconee Joint Regional Sewer Authority and the sweetheart deal that Anderson County came to Oconee County with, and we backed out of it. So if you don't mind, subscribe, listen, share it, let other people know, because the only way this thing's going to get popular is if you tell other people about it. And I know this podcast or this show has been kind of rough, but I promise as time goes on and as I learn more about how to edit and how to do the shows, that it will get better. So if you don't mind, share and let other people know about it. And we're going to get this county straightened out, but I can't do it by myself. I need as many people as possible to help me out. So with that being said, I want everyone to know that this is not it's not a hate show. It's not me hating on anyone. I don't want anything bad to happen to anybody. I don't want their house to burn. I don't want their dog to die. It's not about that. It's about getting the truth out there to the citizens of Oconee County and making it happen. And so with that being said, I want everyone to know that God loves you, and so do I. And with that, I'll close it out. Y'all have a great day.